Welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church; Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville; Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ; and Rabbi Gaylia R. Rooks, the Temple. We begin this week with the recent uptick in juvenile violence and the call from the Jefferson County Commonwealth Attorney to hold parents responsible for their child's violent crimes.
The balloons along Chestnut Street, right by a school bus stop littered with bullets back-to-back weeks, show that the calls for accountability are growing louder.
And what I don't want us to do is make a knee-jerk reaction based on recency bias, but we clearly have to do something.
I talked to Reverend Tim Finley Jr. about the latest idea from the city's top prosecutor, Commonwealth's attorney Jarena Weathers.
You need to put the guns down.
She's calling for Kentucky lawmakers to pass legislation that would open parents up to punishment if their kids are charged with crimes while having a gun.
Parents can be held liable civilly. They can be held liable with truancy law, and they can be held liable when a juvenile damages personal property and things like that. But overall, Michigan is really our first state that actually, on that level, on the felony level, with district attorneys that actually came in and actually prosecuted, parents, and now they're serving time.
So I think it has to be on a case-by-case situation. When you have repeat offenders, I think it becomes much more viable to look at sort of accountability in those kinds of ways, but I think it has to be case by case.
Republican State Representative Jared Bauman of Louisville led the charge on the Safer Kentucky Act. It removes the possibility of probation for juveniles tried as adults for felonies involving a gun.
We've seen culturally an environment where parents have abdicated their responsibility to provide the parental guidance kids need to stay out of this kind of trouble.
Then you have Senate Bill 20 passed last year, which requires kids who are ages 15 and older and charged with the worst felonies involving a gun to be tried as an adult. Meanwhile, Deputy Police Chief Emily McKinley says no matter what, it's important to protect the parents who are trying to do everything they can to protect their kids.
And so getting in front of those kids, getting in front of those parents, offering them resources and saying, hey, we have resources for you, we want to help you. If you choose not to and you continue down this path, there can be severe consequences.
So panel, we come out to you. This comes on the heels of three 15-year-olds shooting at bus stops, a mother killed. We had a great discussion on last week's show about this, but now the call for parents to be held accountable. Your thoughts on this?
I'm not a parent, so I'll let you.
Well, I'll jump in there to start. So when we first heard about this story, one of the things that, when I became a dad, and when I became a pastor, I was a pastor first and then became a dad. One of the things I discovered is we can do the best we can with our kids, right? But it's interesting how you can have two kids in the same house and they turn out really different. When I hear stories like this to say, well, if your child gets accused of a crime, you might be held liable, for instance, in the case of a shooting. We can do the best we can with our kids, but our kids are still going to make choices. They're still going to do things. I'm not sure that making the parent liable for what the child or youth, we're really more talking youth because probably 15 and up, making a parent liable for that, I think goes well beyond the bounds. Again, just because I know when I walk into a restaurant, for instance, and if I see some kids misbehaving, before I was a dad and a pastor, I'd be like, oh, could you please get your child to get control? And then I became a dad and a pastor, and I'm like, it's just not that easy, right? But I think we do live in a culture today where there aren't consequences, like severe consequences for the behaviors and the choices that kids make. The studies tell us it's illegal guns that cause the illegal violence, those kinds of things. But if those kids, 15, 16, 17, if they make those kinds of choices to do those kinds of crimes, then they have to be held accountable. And I agree with not treating them as a youth or an adolescent. I think the crime, the punishment has to be much more severe for the student because they've chosen to make an adult decision. I think they have to be brought before an adult kind of court. They have to be held accountable. And we live in a world today where so many things are not held accountable. So I'm not sure shifting it to making the parents responsible for that is really the right direction. I think there are some things we can do, but the ultimate accountability, I think, still has to lie with the one who commits the crime.
Well, I think it depends on the access and where the guns come from. If the guns are coming from the home and the guns aren't secured as they should be secured, then and the child has ready access to those guns, then I think that is the responsibility of the parent. I think the parents should make sure that those guns are locked and the children, from the time they're really small, understand this is dangerous. This is not a toy. You cannot handle this unless I'm with you. And regardless of, if the child is acting on his or her own or not, there's still that accountability for the parent to make sure if you own guns, they are secure.
My understanding of the statistics, though, that's not the issue.
Exactly.
It's a very small number that even occurs. As we say, you have a parent who does their best, a single parent, to raise a child who basically goes out and gets together with other groups of kiddos, whatever, and someone gives them a gun from that group. Is the family responsible? Well, this law, as we said, I agree, we need to look at the specifics of what they're broadcasting, because this could get even a parent who has nothing to do with this convicted of a felony type thing. I was raised in the 40s and 50s and whatever. My generation was totally different than this generation. You mentioned the restaurant. If that happened in a restaurant, my dad would end it immediately. I mean, that was a different generation. Now parents, they can be sued sometimes for disciplining their children, whatever. Different generation. But I would agree with we need to do something, but the something should not resound back to others. I'm with you on this. If a child wants to act like an adult and do something dangerous, then they should be treated as an adult, and that will basically perhaps remedy that situation. But opening up to what about the other children in the family? You're going to blame them as well. And it's another issue about securing guns in family. The whole thing of you can own a handgun, but you have to have the ammo here and a gun locked here. And why do people own guns? For different reasons. But one of the reasons is for security. So if someone breaks into your home, you have a gun here and ammunition there. Just don't come in yet. Let me get my gun set up here. It's a different issue.
But it does sometimes relate. I mean, tragically, we have seen older siblings accidentally killing their younger sibling, or the younger sibling killing the older sibling because they got access to the gun.
Statistically, minimum.
Right. So, but first thing, I totally agree with you. The days of, hanging the shotgun over the fireplace are long gone.
Not a pickup truck. It's not the pickup truck.
Right. And kids should not have access to guns, period, the end.
No, I disagree.
If the parents are with access on their own to get the guns.
On their own.
Okay, if the parents tell the kids what the combination lock is for their gun storage, then I think the parents should be held accountable, because they're not being responsible.
But again, my comment is statistically.
Okay.
But what happens when you have someone who is, for instance, I was raised hunting and fishing as a little kiddo, and visiting my grandfather, he had shotguns behind the front door type thing, to go out hunting, whatever. Different generation, yes. But if you train a child about gun safety and whatever like that, and some people say, well, that's useless training. No, it's not useless training. Guns are part of it's not just every gun to get rid of the guns, but even the Olympics has, gold medals for the handling of weapons and things of this nature, rifles and guns. It's a sport. I enjoy shooting myself. I have a number of guns, whatever, and I enjoy, as I say, punching paper. But if I have any, no one's allowed in my apartment, whether child or not, because I have guns in that apartment. Now, are they loaded? No. Well, I won't say all of them are not loaded. But as far as having guns, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled numerous times it is a right and all that. That's that Second Amendment stuff we don't need to get into. But back to the point of should the parents be held as felons, I would say no. Because look at if someone is judged to be a felon, look what they lose in this society.
I'm not blanketly going with that. I'm saying in the smaller numbers where the parents have a gun in the house that is not secured, or the teenagers are, I don't want to call them irrational beings, but they have irrational moments.
They are irrational.
They have,
Hormonal.
Yeah, they're very hormonal, and they could get really upset. Like I mean, a lot of teen suicide comes from that, having nothing to do with guns, just the flash of the moment of, I can't deal with this. So if you allow your teen to have access to guns, then I think that you are responsible.
There is some responsibility, but I would say engaging that person as a felon, I would go against that.
Well, when we take a macro problem like gun violence, shootings, when we take a problem like that, and if we want to microtize it to look at what I would call the outliers, those things that you refer to, that it's not the responsible gun owners who have guns whose kids are getting into trouble with guns. It's the people who have the access to getting guns illegally. It's the ones who have the access. And they'll never be able to completely eliminate that unless every gun is eliminated, but we're never going to be able to eliminate every gun as well. Because it is as well.
But there are
as
other
you've
things that can be done.
There
That's
are, and I would agree with that, but
and
extending this to a parental responsibility that says, hey, if my 16-year-old daughter would shoot somebody, then I might be held criminally liable. I didn't do that for my kid, and I might have raised my kid in making all the best decisions, doing the right things. But I think, again, in our culture, we live in a time where, accountability is about at a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10, right? That we make decisions. I teach my kids, you make a decision, you will be held accountable for that decision that you make. And so punishments need to come, consequences need to come. And again, I think we live in a time where it's like, oh, well, we just need to let them off, or wait till this happens or that happens.
But that's not
We've
what
got
I'm
to be
saying.
more serious.
No, and that's not neither one of us are saying. And there's such a thing as so many guns that are available everywhere to everyone if they choose to do that. If you teach your child from the beginning, and this goes back to teaching your child, which is scripture, how to be responsible on every issue, but especially a gun, because it will kill. And they need to understand what that means. But you watch television, you don't understand what killing means. It's everywhere. Oh, well, they died. No, they're back tomorrow. No.
Well, it gets to the point, you mentioned a word which I think is very important in this discussion, alternatives. On the moral side of the news, for many years, I keep hearing people say, well, there's got to be something that we can do. Let's not just say, that's a word that doesn't mean anything unless you specify what is it that can be done. How do you limit the number of guns? That's another legal issue and a moral issue. But as far as alternatives to families here, again, I know of families that have given up guardianship of their children because they simply cannot control them. And that's another issue. Then the state takes the responsibility for it. Have you ever heard the states being punished for what the child does under the state's authority? We need to examine the issue, and as like the Reverend said on the broadcast we saw there, let's look at the particulars. As one of this person says, the details, devil's in the details. Let's look and see what it is, whether it's generalized or whether it's particularized. The problem is, if you look at law, the more general you make it, the easier it is to control in a sense. The more particular you make it, it's very easily done away with.
Well, you mentioned so many things. I don't know which one to start with, but I do want to say that there are alternatives that we can try, having to do with programs for kids after school that they will want to participate in, that they are supervised, counseling, food security, dealing with poverty. I'm not saying that all teenagers who are illegally using guns are coming from, a demographic where there's not supervision, moral education, enough food, enough, someone checking to make sure they did their homework. And you can incentivize kids to want to be part of that kind of a program.
How?
I mean, there's so many ways. I just can't make them up off the top of my head. You could have we're going to go on a trip to New York City. Everyone who graduates this program gets a free trip to New York City. I mean, I don't know why I said that, but because I haven't thought it through. But I mean, there are social services and things we can put in place to try to make life better.
But you're particularizing more and more. You say, if you do this, then this. You reward whatever. But they're talking about on this law is not particularizing at all.
Right.
That's
well,
why I said we need
on the fact of that law, if you were just really tired after a long day at work and there was no bread in the house, and you give your 15-year-old kid the car keys and say, just go down the road and get some bread and come right back, and the kid, accidentally kills someone in the car, are you telling me that parent shouldn't be held responsible?
No, I'm not telling you that at all.
Okay, so
Different issue.
What?
Different issue.
Well, it's the parents. The parents have to be responsible to a certain level.
Agreed.
And they can only be responsible to a certain level. When your kid goes to school and doesn't come home after school, or you're working and you're not going to be there after school when they come home, and there's no one to ask them if they did their homework or help them or whatever, it's a whole different ball of wax. So you need to find ways to engage these kids. And the kids who are doing soccer and basketball and baseball and lacrosse, they are less likely to be the ones who are hanging out in gangs and shooting each other up and things like that. So there have to be ways to, after-school activities that organizations can offer. I mean, you can have all these choices,
well,
break dancing.
Like the deputy police officer they said, let's have the law specify those things, rather than just simply say it's up to the parents to educate the child differently.
Okay, so if we're going to have so many guns in society, as we have, then why not give instruction, just general instruction to children when they reach a certain age on weapons safety?
When I was a youngster, back in the 50s, that's exactly what they did.
So on gun safety, what would that?
How to use a gun?
Those who would like to,
Even when I went to a camp, it was a 4-H camp. They taught you how to use. You got your gun badge.
Right.
Right. And they're shooting skeet in high school now, because my granddaughter did that. Well, so you have to learn how to use the gun. And so I think if you teach more about what guns can do instead of what they see on television, you might have more respect. And I think anytime you teach anything to anybody, they're going to learn something.
Right, especially parents teaching. You constantly hear, the kids aren't listening to me. The kids are watching you and listening to you, and you're educating them.
They're paying attention.
They're paying attention, either for good or for bad.
I think one of the things that gives me angst, so to speak, about wanting to do a law like this is, where is the burden of proof, right? I mean, even our kids today know that, well, if you spank me, I can call somebody and you could get in trouble for this. Well, that might be an extreme example, but the reality is that's the kind of world that we live in. Everything is affected by social media. Everything is affected by TV. Like, our kids are inundated with competing messages all over the place. Again, I think parents, we try to do our best. I think when you look at the data and you see the gun violence, it is not really from the places where gun safety is taught in the home, where persons have guns in the home and they're legally in there and they take care of them and they teach their kids about them and they show them. I mean, the problem is people getting guns illegally that they'll always be able to get. Is there a broader societal issue? Of course there is. And I guess I want us to try to figure out, like, I agree with you in the sense of, are there things that we can do? Are there some incentives, some programs, some things that we can do to try to help that? Absolutely. But we don't fix the problem by holding somebody else accountable when it wasn't them that did it in the first place. I want to be really careful of this, because I want us to figure out how we can hold each other accountable. You were talking about when you were a kid, and I remember if I was out of line somewhere, my neighbors or the other folks in church, they knew that they could come up and grab me by the scuff of the collar and say, "George, stop it. calm down,
Right.
Like, we don't do that anymore. We've kind of lost that sense of the village raising our kids, right? And giving I remember telling my kids at school, I said, we have several of our church members who teach at this school, and they have my permission to get you where you need to be. So you just need to know that. Lots of other places, it's not like that. It's just kind of a free-for-all. Do whatever you want. You might be held accountable, you might not. I think we've got to figure out how to fix that.
Maybe we need parenting classes.
That's not a bad idea. But now, that gets you to another issue.
I know. I think my mind is racing like that little girl who the baby they think was murdered because she's missing. The parents said, oh, she was kidnapped, but the father was convicted of damaging a 10-week-old or something, and the state took the baby away, and then they had another child. I mean, so I think parenting has a lot to do with it. I think holding parents responsible for their guns is what I'm talking about, is very necessary. And I think that we could do such a better job at trying to reach kids and helping them be part of a friend group, you know, like a positive gang instead of a violent gang or a drug gang or something like that. I may sound naive, but I really do think that we can't just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, that's kids these days. It's
No one's doing that.
right. That's what I'm saying is that, but we need to put some good time and energy and resources toward it, you know, with counselors and to be able to address these issues.
I'm just wondering if they really know what the consequences are, if they really understand that their life is pretty much over if they go out and murder somebody. I think the school shootings, they do. They understand that. My life is going to be gone if I take this action. But I'm not sure that 14, 15-year-olds understand the consequences. And so I think it needs to be taught.
Some of the studies I've read from psychology, whatever, it says the age in which we know right from wrong, et cetera, is not until the mid-20s.
Yeah, well, the brain doesn't finish.
Right.
It's still platform.
Right, but we can't,
Until you're over
let that
50.
be the excuse, right?
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
again, I feel like I need to keep coming back to this place in our culture, in our society, in our world, where this being held accountable has so diminished. I mean, we just, I heard a story just today on the news about someone who had been detained who was in our country illegally 5 times. They were arrested and the very next day let go. Like 5 times. So where's the accountability in there, right? Like, no, if you do something wrong, there's going to be a consequence for your choice. At 15, 16, where does the line fall? Again, I think that's tough. I think to come up with just a given standard to say, well, this is it. You know, gosh, I go into high schools today and I see kids with boys with beards.
Right.
Like, I didn't even have to shave every day till I was in my 20s, right? I mean, we know that our world's changing. We know that people are changing. We know that it just, stuff is different. But so I think we need to.
But the guns are different. You know, we have so much gun violence in America that they just don't have in other countries. I mean, all of Europe doesn't have the kind of gun violence that we have because of the easy access and the, I would say, light penalties. If you made it that, okay, your kid's involved in a shooting, if it's your gun as the parent and you allowed them by lax practices or whatever to get that gun, then the parent is responsible and the kid. But if it's an illegal gun that the kid got or something, there should be like a zero tolerance. You were caught with an illegal gun, you know, God forbid, shooting it or killing anyone or whatever, then maybe you need to go into a special program and whatever.
Well, that's why we need to see what the law says. We're talking about something
that's this law.
We're talking about generalities now.
Right.
And there's a model that's based on the Michigan law
Right.
that's been enacted, and I think they've seen success. That's why she's wanting to bring it here.
But the interesting thing is that we see that in the states with the highest and most strict gun laws have some of the highest incidences
Right.
of gun-on-gun violence from illegal guns. Again, not from guns that have been that are legally obtained with background checks and are secured in homes. You know, we secure what we have in my home. People that I know of, they do that, and they train their kids how to use them, and like the hunters and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So again, trying to figure out so where's the problem really occurring? That's not where the problem is. Mm-hmm. The problem is getting a hold of them.
And we had a great discussion about this on last week's show. These kids are being given guns to commit these crimes by 18 and 19-year-olds, so that because they know that they'll be held accountable and can go to jail, so they're having the 15 and 16-year-olds in these gangs commit the crimes for them.
So it's an initiation ritual, sort of?
It's not initiation. It's I'm going to go to jail for murder if I get caught because I'm 18. You're 15 and 14. They're not going to do that to you. So you do this.
Yeah, I think that was part of the impetus for this law in Detroit,
Right.
not Detroit, Michigan, I think it's a state law,
Michigan.
but the idea that you need to track it back. Who is responsible for the child having a gun if it's not the parents? But can you capture whoever the 18, 19-year-old that gave them the gun? Good luck. That would be great. I am all for that. But when you can't, then what are we going to do? And just sitting around talking about it is, we're not the experts, and that's just today's topic. But
yeah, and we only have about a minute left, so there's not time to move on to anything else. Any final thoughts by any? It's a great conversation. It ate up the whole program, and it was a healthy, good conversation.
Haven't they declared that gun violence is a mental health issue? Hasn't that been stated?
I'm not sure.
Not a mental health issue, a physical health issue. That
Oh, a number of kiddos.
Yeah, because
people
it
died
is
because of that. Yeah.
right, or wounded.
But
or
more people
whatever.
die because of car accidents than gun violence.
My
Do we have
brother
more cars than guns?
my brother lives in Barcelona, and the whole joke over the summer, because all these European countries are being inundated by American tourists, and they had water guns, and they were shooting at people.
Tourists,
That
yeah.
might have been in. Sorry, I'm blanking because I know you need
good.
to go.
That's
but
good.
anyway, the idea is that my brother says, I feel a lot safer living in Europe because guns.
The issue is the Second Amendment, and I've said this many times before, we need to have that truly examined by the authorities. If you want to go to the Supreme Court, some people have a problem with that now. But let the people decide if that truly is part of it, as it's interpreted, if that's what the Constitution says. I don't know.
And with that, that'll fill out our time for today. So, again, thanks
it was
for
the muzzle.
a very good conversation. Reverend Dr.
that
George
note,
Wasson, Faithpoint Church, Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville, Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and Rabbi Gaylia R. Rooks with the Temple. Thank you for a great discussion today. Thank you for joining us on Moral Side of the News. Join us again next week for an all-new show. Have a good week.